In the rolling hills of a quiet countryside, where the winds whispered through the trees and the golden fields stretched as far as the eye could see, there lived a farmer named John Reynolds. A man of the earth, John had spent his entire life tending to the land his family had cultivated for generations. His hands were calloused from years of hard work, and his heart was as steady as the seasons. Yet, despite the peace of the countryside, there was a quiet yearning in John's soul, a yearning for something different, something extraordinary. That's when Titan came into his life. Titan was no ordinary horse. Towering over 6 feet at the shoulder, with a coat as dark as a stormy night and eyes that glimmered like twin moons, he was a sight to behold. John had always admired horses, their grace, their power, and their bond with the land. But Titan, with his sheer size and presence, was something else entirely. He moved with an almost majestic elegance, his powerful muscles rippling beneath his coat. Despite his imposing stature, there was a gentleness to him that immediately drew John in. It wasn't clear where Titan had come from. The horse had appeared on the outskirts of John's farm one chilly morning, as if summoned by the earth itself. No one in town knew of his origins, and there were no signs of his previous owner. Some whispered that he was a runaway, while others claimed he was a gift from the heavens. Regardless of where he had come from, one thing was certain: Titan was here to stay. The first time John laid eyes on the horse, he felt an unspoken connection. Titan's intelligent gaze seemed to pierce right through him, as if the horse could see the very core of his being. With a gentle nod, John knew that this horse was different. He wasn't just a creature of strength and grace. There was something deeper, a quiet wisdom that resonated with John's soul. John decided to take Titan in, unsure of what the future held but certain that this magnificent creature had a purpose in his life. Little did he know, Titan's arrival would soon lead John down a path that would forever change the course of his life. The sun had barely risen when John decided it was time to put Titan to work. The harvest season was fast approaching, and the farm needed to be prepared for the long winter ahead. There was an old wagon sitting in the back of the barn, its wooden wheels caked with dirt and weathered by years of neglect. John had always intended to use it for hauling firewood, but it had sat unused for too long. Today, he figured, was the day. He hooked Titan to the wagon, admiring the horse's imposing figure as the giant stood quietly, waiting for instruction. Titan's coat gleamed in the morning light, a striking contrast to the barn's shadowy interior. John felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as he tightened the straps around the horse's broad chest. He wasn't entirely sure what to expect. Titan had been a part of the farm for only a short time, and while the horse had displayed incredible strength and intelligence, John wondered how the wagon would fare under such a heavy load. "Let's see what you can do, boy," John murmured as he led Titan out of the barn, the wheels of the wagon scraping against the dirt floor. With a gentle nudge from John, Titan took the first step, pulling the wagon forward with surprising ease. The heavy wooden wheels creaked and groaned, but they held steady as Titan moved forward with smooth, measured strides. John watched in awe as the horse's muscles rippled under his dark coat. He had never seen such raw power in an animal before. At first, the task seemed effortless. Titan pulled the wagon along the dirt road with a strength that seemed almost supernatural. John followed behind, the creak of the wagon's wheels filling the air with each step. Titan's steady rhythm seemed to blend with the rhythm of the earth itself. It was an awe-inspiring sight, a true testament to the bond between man and beast. But as they reached the hill that led toward the firewood stacks, the struggle began. The gentle incline that should have been a simple task for the giant horse soon became a challenge. Titan's massive legs began to strain as the weight of the wagon seemed to push against him. The wheels, long unused, began to protest, their squeals echoing through the crisp morning air. John's brow furrowed in concern as he watched Titan's determination. The horse, despite the growing difficulty, continued to pull forward, his breath coming in ragged bursts. His large hooves pounded the earth with each step, and his once smooth movements began to falter. "Come on, Titan," John urged, his voice steady but filled with concern. He couldn't help but feel a sense of pride in the horse's resilience. But he knew something wasn't right. The wagon seemed heavier than it should have been, as if it was carrying more than just firewood. The way Titan struggled to pull it suggested there was something hidden, something that was weighing him down far more than expected. Titan's movements grew slower, each step more labored than the last. John's heart raced as he rushed to the horse's side. Sweat dripped from Titan's forehead, and his large nostrils flared with each breath. John could see the strain in his eyes, the sheer effort it took for the horse to continue. Finally, with one last heave, Titan stopped. His powerful chest heaved with exhaustion, and he stood still, refusing to budge. John approached him slowly, concern etching his face. The horse was spent, clearly struggling under the weight of the wagon. John took a step back and examined the wagon more closely, his gaze narrowing as he noticed the unevenness of the load. Something wasn't right. He walked around to the front of the wagon, trying to understand what had caused Titan such difficulty. As he stepped closer to the side, a deep feeling of unease washed over him. It wasn't just the weight of the wagon that was the problem. Something hidden inside was causing it to be far heavier than he had anticipated. John stood beside Titan, his heart pounding in his chest as he carefully examined the wagon. The massive horse was still, his large body heaving with exhaustion, sweat dripping down his neck. John's brow furrowed in confusion as he surveyed the uneven load. He had known the wagon was old, but there was something more to this struggle. The weight Titan had been dragging wasn't just firewood, as he had originally assumed. It was something heavier, something that made Titan's powerful muscles strain like they had never been tested before. With a deep breath, John approached the wagon, his hands trembling slightly. He stepped closer to the covered load, the tarp now loose and rustling in the wind. He hesitated for a moment, a strange sense of foreboding creeping over him. But curiosity pushed him forward. Titan had been so determined to pull this wagon, as though it was a mission he couldn't abandon. And now, standing before it, John knew that whatever was hidden inside the wagon was far more significant than he could have imagined. Slowly, he lifted the edge of the tarp, his fingers brushing against the rough, weathered fabric. The cover revealed nothing but shadows at first. But as he pulled it back further, a surge of shock washed over him. The tarp slid away to reveal what lay beneath a sight that would forever change his understanding of Titan's mission. Inside the wagon were 3 horses. Their bodies were fragile and frail, their coats matted with dirt, and their ribs visible beneath their thin skin. They were barely conscious, their eyes dull and exhausted. John's breath caught in his throat as he took in the heartbreaking sight. There was a young foal nestled between the 2 adult horses, its small body shaking with the cold. The sight of them, so helpless and neglected, struck John with an overwhelming sense of sadness. It was clear that they had been abandoned, left to fend for themselves in a world that had forgotten them. Titan, who had been standing quietly beside the wagon, now stepped forward, his large head lowering toward the injured horses. His nostrils flared as he sniffed at them, his eyes softening with an unmistakable tenderness. It was as though he recognized them not just as fellow creatures, but as part of something deeper, something he had been bound to protect. The way he carefully nuzzled the foal's head, as if to reassure it, left John speechless. The bond between Titan and the other horses was undeniable, and it became clear to John that Titan had not just been pulling this wagon out of strength or routine. There was a purpose behind his struggle, an unspoken mission that he had carried out with quiet determination. Titan had been protecting these horses, bringing them somewhere safe, just as he had always done quietly, without asking for help. John knelt beside the wagon, his hands shaking as he reached out to touch the closest adult horse. It was a mare, her coat once glossy and rich, now dull from neglect. Her breathing was shallow, and she let out a soft whinny as John gently stroked her mane. His heart ached as he felt the weight of her frailty beneath his touch. He could tell she had suffered, but there was a flicker of life still in her, a flicker that only came alive in the presence of kindness. His mind raced with questions. Who had left these horses to die, abandoned on the edge of nowhere? Why had Titan been left to carry them, burdened with their safety when no one else had cared? And why had he come to John's farm, a place where he had found refuge but nothing more? As John pondered these questions, he knew one thing for certain. Titan had carried these horses for a reason, and he had chosen John to be their protector. It was no accident that Titan had found his way to this farm. John didn't fully understand the depths of the horses' loyalty or why the mare and foal had been left behind, but it was clear that the fate of these horses now rested in his hands. John stood up slowly, his gaze shifting between Titan and the fragile horses in the wagon. With a deep breath, he made a silent promise to them, a promise that he would care for them, no matter the cost. The path ahead would be difficult, and the weight of the responsibility was heavy on his shoulders, but he knew he couldn't turn away now. Titan had brought them here for a reason, and John would honor that reason. As the days passed, John could not shake the image of the frail horses in the wagon. Their fragile bodies haunted him, their eyes empty from the ordeal they had endured. But what troubled him even more was the mystery behind how they had ended up there. Who would abandon such beautiful creatures, leaving them to suffer in silence? And why had Titan, the giant horse who had shown such loyalty, been burdened with the responsibility of dragging them to safety? The more John thought about it, the more he realized that Titan's arrival at his farm had not been a mere coincidence. The horse had shown up at the right moment, as if drawn by some invisible force, with a purpose that was still unclear. He knew he needed answers, but finding them would take more than just asking around. John began his investigation by visiting the town's local library, hoping to uncover any history that might explain the horse's condition. Mrs. Timmons, the elderly librarian who had known the town's stories better than anyone, was more than happy to help. As John sat down with her in the dusty back corner of the library, she began to pull old newspapers and records, telling him stories of the area's past. "Years ago," Mrs. Timmons began, "there was a man named Harold Buchanan. He was a well-known horse breeder in these parts, one of the most respected in the county. But he wasn't always kind-hearted." John leaned forward, eager for more. What happened to him? Why would anyone leave these horses like this? Mrs. Timmons paused, clearly hesitant to relive some of the darker days of the town's history. Buchanan was once a wealthy man. His horses were sought after by breeders from all over. But his obsession with perfection, it drove him to neglect the very animals he claimed to care for. The horses that didn't meet his standards, the older ones that had served their purpose, he'd discard them like they were nothing. John's gut twisted as he processed her words. It sounded like the fate of the horses in the wagon had been sealed long ago. Buchanan's obsession with breeding perfect horses had left a trail of destruction, and it seemed these three, the mare, the foal, and the old stallion, had become his victims. Did anyone ever try to help them? John asked quietly. Mrs. Timmons nodded sadly. A few years ago, Buchanan fell on hard times. His once thriving breeding business crumbled under debts, and soon he was a shadow of the man he once was. Some say he became paranoid, thinking that everyone was out to take his horses. He abandoned many of them, leaving them to fend for themselves. No one knew where he went after that, but those who saw him said he was a broken man, consumed by guilt. John felt a pang of sympathy for the man, despite his cruelty. He could see now that the horses had been discarded when they no longer fit into Buchanan's plans. Yet, somehow, Titan had remained behind, protecting the others. There had to be a deeper reason. "I've heard rumors," Mrs. Timmons continued, her voice lowering, "that Titan was once Buchanan's prized horse. He wasn't just another animal. He was something special. Some believe Buchanan became so obsessed with perfecting his bloodline that he couldn't bear to let Titan go, even when the horse grew too old to breed." The pieces were beginning to fall into place. Titan had stayed behind, perhaps out of loyalty to his fellow horses, perhaps because of the bond he had with them, a bond that transcended the cruelty of his former owner. But why had he come to John? What had driven him to drag these horses all the way to John's farm, of all places? As John left the library, he couldn't help but feel a growing sense of respect for the giant horse. Titan had carried the weight of his past for far too long, and now, it seemed, it was time for him to begin a new chapter. But John knew that the journey ahead would not be easy. Caring for the rescued horses would require more than just physical labor. It would take patience, compassion, and a deep understanding of the bond between man and animal. Titan had brought the horses to John, and in doing so, he had entrusted him with their future. John knew he couldn't let them down. As the days passed, John couldn't help but notice the profound bond between Titan and the horses he had saved. It wasn't just the way Titan pulled the wagon or the strength he exhibited in the face of adversity, it was in the quiet moments. Every evening, after the day's labor, Titan would stand watch over the mare, foal, and the older stallion. His gentle presence was a constant reassurance, his massive frame a protective shield for the frail horses who now relied on him. The mare, once so fragile and wary, began to trust Titan completely, grazing peacefully by his side. The foal, though hesitant at first, learned to nuzzle Titan's neck, finding comfort in the warmth of his body. The stallion, though proud and independent, often stood close to Titan, a silent acknowledgment of the horse's role as their protector. John watched in awe, realizing that Titan wasn't just a strong animal. He was a leader, a guardian, and a symbol of loyalty. In their shared moments of peace, John saw how deeply Titan's care for the horses went beyond mere survival. It was love. And in that love, a healing process began for all of them. Titan had found his purpose, and so had John. The farm, once quiet and solitary, had transformed into a place of new life and hope. John no longer felt like just a farmer. He was now the guardian of something far more precious. Titan and the rescued horses had become his family, and together they had created something extraordinary, a bond forged not just in care, but in shared purpose. The barn, once a place of decay and neglect, had been restored, now standing as a symbol of their collective strength. Each morning, John woke to the sound of hooves against the earth, a reminder of how far they had come. Titan, the giant horse who had once pulled the weight of the past, now lived free of it, his heart no longer burdened by his former owner's mistakes. The mare and foal were thriving, their coats shining in the sun, and the older stallion stood proudly beside Titan, no longer a victim but a survivor. John realized that the farm wasn't just a place where he worked, it had become a home filled with love, trust, and healing. And as he looked out over the fields, with Titan standing by his side, he knew that this new chapter, full of promise and companionship, was just the beginning.